Welcome back. As you see here, I don't think I have to present him. You should know him. He's the rector of this university, and I thank you very much. So this panel, we will discuss probably a key point to our contemporary life that regards the digital future. I mean, as you know, I haven't to tell you, of course, because I'm a boomer, you are not. Everything is done online now, even the war. As you know, I mean, cyber war is a big thing. But the digital transformation should be also the pillar of tomorrow's fair and sustainable prosperity worldwide. But however, the potential of digital technologies is increasingly scaled back by international disputes over the internet and over data governance. One example is Russia, that is making a closed data, but other countries are thinking about that. So there have been also what economists call black swans, COVID-19, and of course the war. How to fight digital fragmentation and move towards a universal and affordable internet access, and how to strike a balance between digital sovereignty and data protection. So, Director Gianmario Verona, you already know, and there is no need to introduce him here. This is his house. And we are linked up with Maria Francesca Spatolizano, Secretary General's Acting Envoy at the UN on Technology at the United Nations. Thank you very much for being with us. You hear us? Yes, you do.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I would like to start with you, Dr. Spatolizano. So diverging digital frameworks are increasingly adopted across the world. And the internet is growing more and more fragmented, as we said in the introduction. What are the risks that you see?
First of all, let me thank you all for the organizers for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to address this session at the Global Policy Forum. The risks of a fragmented internet are many, of course, and they go from governmental policies that restrict individual autonomy or even worse, violate human rights online, to actions by corporate actors that reflect their increasing dominance over the online space. And so the concept of an interoperable, open, free internet is increasingly under threat. Now, it's very difficult to measure, as you can imagine, but an NGO called Access Now has reported recently that 34 countries had recorded 182 cases of internet blocking by government in 2021 alone. So think how diffuse this practice is. And current global events, including, of course, the war in Ukraine, has only brought to the fore the divisions in the digital world that mirror, unfortunately, the divisions in the physical world. And we can, of course, see the open, free, and secure internet that we all would like to have as a new form of global public good. There are some who challenge the notion, but I think it's proven by the pandemic and how much of the activities we could not perform in person anymore were nevertheless maintained thanks to the technologies. So I think it's a fair statement to say it is a public good. But certainly, if not, if some do not agree, certainly they would agree that an open, free, and secure internet is a critical enabler of sustainable development and an invaluable means to empower humanity to continue to do what they want in this new media. But now, even if we agree philosophically on the need to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms online, in practice, as you mentioned, there are still very difficult balances to be struck between the many complex issues at the heart of internet fragmentation. In particular, think of the need to protect individual privacy, in that it is often entangled, linked with the questions of access to information, or the need to address misinformation and harmful ideas online, which borders with the freedom of expression protection. So balancing the aspects of regulation and openness is clearly a challenge. In the end, it is about building, I would say, democratic societies, supporting accountability of institutions and private companies alike. Why do I say this? Because, and here I refer to some reflection in the UN, which really we all agreed on: internet shutdowns, slowdowns, banning of particular applications interfere not only with free expression, but also they negatively impact the enjoyment of other rights like security, employment, education, health, as we have seen in previous panels, and political participation, including elections. You have seen how many interferences with elections in very advanced countries we have observed, unfortunately, in recent times. So indeed, keeping the internet on and expanding connectivity and affordability included in the content for those on the other side of the digital divide are essential for sustainable development, for peace, and for human rights.
Well, yes, you addressed some key problems to the internet, I mean, especially regarding the free access and the differences between countries. I mean, being a journalist, I mean, for me, it's easy to say just, well, it's different in China, in Russia, than probably in Norway. And, well, I wanted to ask you, one of the UN strategies is to steer digital interdependence towards cooperation rather than confrontation. So at what point are we there?
Well, the United Nations Secretary General has long been concerned over the internet fragmentation and the growing trend towards different splinter nets. And some of you may be already well familiar with the efforts of the UN, which have accelerated, I would say, in recent years to promote global digital cooperation. I will mention here three recent actions. One is the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation that the Tech Envoy Office is now implementing, with key concrete actions on universal connectivity, digital inclusion, digital human rights, and the Internet Governance Forum. Plus, all these are fundamental building blocks we are trying to develop towards an open and unfragmented internet. Second, we also work closely as the Office of the Tech Envoy with the other UN agencies and other partners. So it's not just for the UN, but it's a broader set of actors we want to engage. Governments, civil societies, technology companies, of course, so that we can build partnership and understandings in this area, which sometimes come from very different angles. And we, in these round tables we convene, we have a cross-regional and multi-stakeholder presence. And third, let me say, in his report called Our Common Agenda, which was issued last September, Secretary General Guterres has made a very important, a fundamental proposal to call for a global digital compact, which should materialize, so to speak, at the UN Summit of the Future to be held next year in September. And we at the UN see this global digital compact as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring together all the digital players, not just the government, but also civil society, private sector, other stakeholders, so to forge a new understanding and to agree on common principles for our digital futures. There are, as you mentioned, several different set of regulations. So we would like to bring together all the actors to agree on a set of common principles so that we have a framework which helps everybody to stay together, so to speak. And in fact, the report also explicitly calls out internet fragmentation as one of the key areas that the compact should address. Precisely in times like we are now, growing online division and fracture, the UN is working to build a consensus around this vision of a more open, free, secure, and unfragmented digital future. So looking ahead, we warmly welcome your contribution and the engagement as we prepare for the digital compact. The Office of the Tech Envoy has recently launched, let me announce, an online platform on our website, and it is a public call for input on what should be the content of the compact. And I encourage each one of you to visit the platform, organize consultations around it, and provide us with your input. And any idea of cooperating and collaborating with the office is also welcome. At this point, it is important for me to recall here that the Secretary General has also recently appointed his new next envoy on technology, in the person of Mr. Amandi, and he will take up his duties mid-July, so in less than a month, and I warmly welcome him, and I hope you will do as well. So in conclusion, if we are to build a brighter digital future for all, we cannot, as the topic of today's forum suggests, stand divided. We must emphasize multilateral and multi-stakeholder approach and cooperation, engaging us all in the pursuit based on shared values, such as those of the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So instead of standing divided, we must stand united, because as the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall.
Thank you, Dr. Spatolisano, especially because you highlighted, well, the key issues, and if it comes to this compact next year, well, that would be quite a revolution for the world, because, I mean, it is, of course, I can imagine how difficult it is to put at the same table all the different players. But now with Professor Verona, I would like to go a bit more in depth. So besides the regulations, what tools can Europe envisage to narrow its technological divide? Because here in Europe, so let's talk about us, because we do have a technological divide versus China, versus the US.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And let me say that this is a very complicated question with a very simple answer, which is innovation. So we have to innovate more. And let me get to a motivation of this simple answer. Essentially, digital technology is what economists call a general purpose technology. It is a type of technology which serves the purposes of many other technologies and many other sectors. So essentially, it's not just about the digital, but it's about how we live. It's about how we communicate, as we have seen over the pandemic. It's about producing new drugs. It's about listening to music. It's about everything. And the history of humankind tells us that there have been at least two other general purpose technology, which is the steam engine back in the 1700s and the electricity back in the 1900s. And this general purpose technology bring into life a sort of revolution, which we called in modern times industrial revolution. So I believe that, I wouldn't say a mistake, but probably a disattention of Europe in the last 25 years has been to not consider this technology as the engine of an industrial revolution. Now, even like it happened with the case of electricity and what is happening in these days in digital technology, there are markets that are more keen to innovate. And so the United States has been the pioneer in introducing many innovations back in the 20th century. And it has been, the country that has created most of the innovation in this field. In fact, today we talk about the big tech. We talk about this new acronym like FANGM, so Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, and so on and so forth. Now, they could do that because the structure of markets in the United States is very liberal, is very much an intertwine between financial sector and real economy. Now, what China did was something very interesting, because basically China, back at the beginning of the millennium, understood the fact that this was an industrial revolution and decided, of course, China is not Europe, I would say also fortunately, and decided to stop what is going on in China with respect to these digital innovations. And they created their own capabilities in terms of innovation scale. And so they saw Amazon, and they, of course, produced differently with their own creativity. Alibaba, they have seen, Google, and they have done Baidu, and so on and so forth. So they invested a lot of money in innovating and in transforming their own industries. And I guess that this has been very wise from the Republic of China. Now, what Europe did, Europe is a big market, right? It's 450 million users of this technology. We fell in love, like everyone falls in love with this type of technology. We have an entire new generation, which is called Gen Z or millennials, right? All these people that were born, after the late 90s and Gen Z after 2000 that really are into this technology. Many of our students here, for example. And so we have been a wonderful market, but with limited supply. We have some cases of ventures in Europe. I'm thinking about Spotify, for example, which is an important venture in Sweden, or Yux, for example, in Italy. Federico Marchetti, by the way, Bocconi alumnus, created Yux, that is, of course, a leading company in the fashion market, in the digital technology. But Europe has been lagging behind a little bit in this innovation game, which, again, is crucial in these years. Now, the positive angle, which I personally see in these days, is the Next Generation EU Fund. Because finally, Europe, probably because also of the pandemic, and seeing how much we have used the technology with the smart working, with remote teaching, and so on and so forth, has decided to dedicate most of the funds to, of course, the sustainability challenges that are crucial for Europe to survive, but also to digital technology. And I really hope that this intention to innovate will, of course, go beyond also in the next years, the Next Generation EU Fund. In Italy, for example, we have this PNRR, which is a crucial plan of the Next Generation EU Fund that will bring us a lot of attention in this. But I really hope that also bankers in Europe, in general, most of politicians understand that it's crucial really to stimulate with incentives across states this need of innovation.
Well, that's crucial, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, just think of the whole of Europe, the whole of Italy could be connected and have access to internet. It would be quite a hell of a difference. Now, overcoming the digital divide is both an educational, and that's your field, and a cultural challenge as well. How can higher education, as Bocconi University and other institutions, contribute towards that?
Now, this is another very important point, because as you notice, this is clearly a cultural challenge. There is also an infrastructure challenge, which is, of course, the premise in order to then win the cultural challenge. And again, I believe that infrastructure-wise, again, also thinking what Dr. Spatorizano was saying before, we are trying to do much better. And again, going back to the Next Generation EU Fund, most of these funds, technologically wise, are invested really to make the divide smaller from this infrastructure viewpoint. So I'm seeing, for example, in the case of Italy, the south closer to the north, the peripheries of big cities closer to the cities. But then once we have also the infrastructure, it's a matter of winning the cultural challenge. And again, this is big, because we are changing the ways also, again, we work, we behave, and we have to get used to these new ways. We have to have this taste for innovation, let me put it this way, in order to really embrace this cultural challenge. Now, the paradox of this technology is that on the one hand, it poses the challenge, but at the same time also it has in its own DNA the solution, because basically this is an open technology, right? It's a technology which is in most cases free. And so we can access, for example, the knowledge related to this type of technology. And I see at least three mechanisms that are in place already in these years. First of all, the big tech are providing a lot of, for example, of courses for people to familiarize and to become politicized with this type of technology. And they are also producing certificates with respect to this. And this is very important also for the workforce. Now, in these years of great resignation, as they call it in the United States, part of this depends upon also the fact that you don't feel apt to run specific jobs because you are not a data scientist, for example. So this first mechanism in place is very important. Then there are a lot of new operators, new startups, that again, unfortunately, come primarily from US and China that are into education. And so I'm thinking about big names in the market like edX or Coursera, which are providing many courses in this respect. But the third mechanism, which I personally like a lot, is what universities can do. So I personally believe that incumbents of education industry, education sectors, have to really support this transformational period in order to provide, again, the mechanisms for all the students, and not simply in their own country, but in the whole entire world, to access this. And so there are many initiatives that can be done. And so just as a small example of my institution, which is, by the way, imitating what, for example, Wharton University, the Wharton UPenn University with the Wharton is doing in the United States. We have written in the 2025 strategic plan that we will launch a bachelor degree for developing countries, which will be entirely online. And this is something very important because this provides access to people that cannot afford traveling, that cannot afford the beautiful, of course, on-campus experience, which many universities can provide to their own students. So again, the positive angle is that there is a challenge, but at the same time, like it happened in your sector, for example, in the media industry, in the news industry, internets tend to commoditize most of the things, and so access is also simple. So it's important, the regulation, it's important to provide everyone the access, but I believe that the future will go more and more in this direction.
Well, sure is. Well, thank you very much, because I mean, of course, even in our field, life changed completely with when everything went online. So, I mean, in a good, and it poses many challenges as well that we have to take. We can't just not ignore them. Professor, thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Spatolisano, for being with us. Now I want to introduce the next speakers of the panel, and again, we'll bring you around the world. We start with Indonesia, with Dr. Venkatachalam Ambumosi. He's Director of the Research Strategy and Innovation of ERIA and co-chair T20 Indonesia. Thank you for being with us. And Claudia Costin, Director of the Center for Excellence and Innovation in Educational Policies, Fundação Getúlio Vargas, and Jane Horvath, who is here with us in person, and I ask her to come on stage. Thank you so much. Senior Director of Global Privacy, Apple. Thank you so much. I know that Dr. Costin, she has got a plane to catch. So if the other speakers don't mind, I'll first pose the questions and then we free her, because she has to catch that plane and we don't want to delay her. So I wanted to start asking you that about the broader use of technology will inevitably increase the need for digital technology-related skills, as we heard from Director Verona. Are education systems able to meet these needs?
Okay, so first, thank you for the kind invitation from the organizers. And no, they are not evenly organized to address these needs. Unfortunately, although there has been a huge expansion in connectivity and access to the digital content, it is unevenly distributed among regions and within countries. And the education system very early on needs to address these needs. And COVID had made it really clear with schools closures and the difficulty to reach the students that were in rural areas, some countries like my own in Brazil and some other countries in Latin America, for example, were 2 full school years with their schools closed, completely closed. So if connectivity was not available, it was an issue. But as you mentioned in your question, digital skills also need to be available for teachers. And yes, they were already using the internet in many countries before that, but not for teaching purposes. And they had very quickly in crash digital courses to learn how to do it. And it is very important that we not only provide the connectivity that was lacking, but that we provide teachers with the skills that they developed in a very unorganized way. And so in technology is important for building human capabilities, and a recent UNESCO document mentioned it is also a basic human right, the access to connectivity and to digital skills. So we have to ensure that they are used, including to rebuild the losses, the learning losses that happen in K-12 education and also in university students. Students are coming to the university much less prepared after these school closures that were also uneven, and technology might be a response. But there is another side to that I will, in my final comment to your question, mention, that since AI and an accelerated automation is replacing human work, is killing jobs. Yes, other jobs will be created in this digital revolution, but it is, for the time being, replacing human skills. It is very important to provide young students not only with digital competences, but the competences needed to thrive in this new era, such as critical thinking, collaborative problem-solving skills with creativity, other skills that complement the digital skills. Otherwise, teachers will be replaced by computers and people will be replaced by algorithms. And definitely that's not what we want for the world.
No, that's rather dystopic. I mean, to think that computers can replace teachers and persons. But I wanted to ask you, before we let you go, I mean, of course, access to digitalization and to the net is important, and also the know-how. But then there comes also another division, a gender division, because only 18% of tertiary education are girls that pursue the so-called STEM studies, that means science, technology, engineering and maths, compared to 35% of boys. How does that impact, and how can one address this inequality?
Well, first, a quick comment on the dystopia. It is not a dystopia, it's not that computers will substitute people in general, but inequalities will widen, will be deepened in a sense, because some people will have their jobs replaced by computers, some no, but unfortunately those less prepared, especially in the developing countries, will be the ones that will see their jobs disappear. On the gender division, it's very important to take practical approaches in education policies. For example, bringing role models to schools, not to universities, starting very early on, bringing scientists to talk to the girls, also reserving some time, booking some time and space for exposing young students to different career paths and work possibilities, and fighting those stigmatized approaches to careers such as science, technology, engineering are for boys, not for girls. And in a context where the world of work is changing so rapidly, it's very important to teach them that they are the entrepreneurs of their own future lives. I mean, students from K-12, it's not starting with university, and showing them that they can aim high, and that the girls have a vast field of possibilities open to them. And last but not least, showing them that they can interview women scientists and think of life plans that they will be able to build, and that environment will be very receptive for women.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you are in time to catch your flight. Thank you, because that's especially the aspect of gender equality, and to make it possible for women, for girls to have access and have a safe future afterwards. That is really very, very important. Now, I think that the biggest question of all regarding the digital world, I would like to pose to Jane Horvath here from Apple. And in the past few years, tracking, we're talking about privacy, so you all know what we mean. Tracking has become ubiquitous. As a result, consumers have become increasingly concerned, especially here in Europe, and we do have different laws than the US, as you know, about their data being used in unexpected ways, either by the companies or by governments or external powers. So in your view, is the consumer tech industry doing really enough?
So first, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to talk today, and you have hit the nail on the head. Over, particularly the pandemic, but in the last 10 years, as our lives have become more and more digitized, it's really, really important that we get the privacy equation correct. I will say that at Apple, privacy is a fundamental human right. I've been at Apple for 10 years. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at Apple, spend 100% of my time focused on building privacy, along with a robust cross-functional team at Apple, including support and commitment from our Chief Executive Officer. So the advertising question is a really good one, and probably best illustrated in telling the story about advertising in our ecosystem. So 11 years ago, when I started at Apple, there was advertising on the platform. Apps were using what was a hardware identifier to target ads on the platform. So hardware identifier is a identifier kind of like a serial number on your device, can't be changed, and they were using it to share data across apps. And we realized that that was actually not a privacy-friendly way, because you can't reset it. It travels with your device, and users had no choice. They were getting targeted, their data was getting shared. So we launched a new advertising platform, recognizing that advertising plays a pretty critical role in the ecosystem. And that new technology it was on, but it focused on giving our customers choice over what was happening with their data. And we rapidly realized, it was an opt-out choice, that the data arms race was continuing. So my team also gets a lot of customer questions into our privacy queue. And one of the questions that was resonating, and there's more forms of this, but I'll give you an example. I was talking to my husband the other day about a shoe that I'd like him to give me for a holiday present. And suddenly, that shoe is following me all over my device. Is my phone listening to me? And in fact, no, your phone is not listening to you. Probably she looked at the shoe on an app, and that app then shared the fact that she was looking and interested in a shoe with third-party advertising networks. And those third-party advertising networks were placing shoe ads to get her attention. Hey, please buy this shoe, everywhere she went. And so in response to that, we realized that we needed to do something different, and we needed to put our customer at the center of this. They were obviously not understanding what was going on with their data. So 2 years ago, we flipped the choice. The choice is now, and we announced it, we gave apps 9 months to prepare, but the apps now, if they want to track you, meaning if they want to share your data with third parties or link third-party data, they now have to ask you. They have to make a case for the value proposition. So that puts the consumer at the center of things. And I think the conversation has been, you know, you can't have great products and services and still have privacy, but we really reject that. And I think it's very, very critically important as we move further and further into the digital future that we get it right.
Well, sure. I think we could stay hours talking about this, because I do think that privacy on the net is crucial, because yes, of course, I also have an iPhone. It's better than the others. But there are, of course, issues, because it's not Apple. It is the system that has many critical issues, especially on data sharing. Who is controlling them, what the companies do, but it will take hours. I want to go now to Indonesia, to Dr. Ambu Mozi, and I'd like to ask you how to leverage digital transformation for a stronger and smarter world economical recovery, because the whole world is should recover after 2 years of pandemic, where digitalization has been key, but has also shown a big divide.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for having this panel. Here, if you look from the perspective of developing and emerging economies, the COVID has pushed the digitalization everywhere. And so many countries felt that is placing the digital as the core of the recovery is a good strategy, because this strategy includes basically a cost-effective way, bringing these kind of a new transformational elements in the industries. Aside from the economic benefits, going digital also offering the emerging economies lifestyle work changes. For example, we calculated the ASEAN smart cities, a network of 29 cities. By bringing this digital technologies, a combination of the digital technologies, we could be able to reduce the carbon emissions by 20 to 30%. And also, we have proven that during this pandemic lockdown period, nearly 50% of the FDI is coming into that digital infrastructure rather than the original conventional structure. It has been proven that is the returns from this digital infrastructure improvement has been 70% more than the normal one. And also, this returns also varies from the industries. And for example, asset-heavy industries in this region, and for example, in Indonesia, realize more value from automation, like robotics. And then asset-light industries realize a greater value from the mobile and the social media, primarily driven by these efficiency-driven opportunities. So this is a kind of hard reality we witnessed during this pandemic. And if you see that pandemic, we can see there is 4 stages of digitalization. One is the rebound phase that happened in the initial 3 months period, where the temporal changes has been observed in observing these technologies. And the second stage is the next 6 months is more about the substitution, which is more related to the permanent or the semi-permanent changes in the consumer goods and the services. And the third stage is, it happened during the recovery, is a process where there is a working style has been changed, and it also revolutionized some of these industries.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
If you look into this, these are basically characterized that is consistent with the whole world, and particularly the developing and emerging economies are moving into a smart economy, which has been enabled by the combination of the technologies. But one thing is very, very vivid, this digital divide, the gaps between the haves and have-nots. For example, if you take the small and medium enterprises in Germany, they have most of them have about 87% of them have the high-speed internet. But if you come into the Indonesia, it is only 20%. This digital divide also exists between the urban areas and the rural areas. So more investment is needed from the private sector, and also the regulations are required.
Well, that's really very important, Dr. Ambomosi, because of course, I mean, in the higher income countries, I mean, even small enterprises have access to fiber, to fast data exchange, whereas in many countries, for instance, in Asia or in Africa, it's more difficult if you are in a rural area. That's also where many people live. But now back to privacy, because that's the core, I suppose. So different data privacy laws, I've mentioned that in the beginning, across countries means also different kind of protection rights for internet users. I mean, typically Europe, US, or other side of the world, China. How to avoid a division into first-class and second-class citizens?
It's a great question, and I think that the most interesting part of your question is you said Europe and the US. Europe has an omnibus privacy law. It has GDPR, and GDPR has really set the standard across the world. It's led, in particular in our company, we've committed to GDPR user rights across the world, but the United States, interestingly enough, does not have an omnibus privacy law. There are some states in which they've passed an omnibus law, similar to GDPR, so there's actually not even protection across the US. And then if you start to look out across the globe, there are countries that have passed privacy laws that are actually data localization laws. There are countries who say, okay, we're going to pass a privacy law, but it's really a surveillance law. They've realized if the data is in their country, they can get access to it. So they pass a data localization law. So there is a patchwork of laws right now. And then we also have to look at government access to data. And I think that there needs to be a common framework on both consumer privacy and government access to data. And a shout out to the OECD, because they are currently working on the framework with respect to government access. But you know, I think it's high time that all citizens have a common level of protection so they can take control of their data.
Well, that would be really, let's say, the day, because I mean, at the moment we seem rather far away from that. And I wanted to again go to Indonesia, to Dr. Ambomosi, because you are also you are the co-chair at the T20 Task Force on Meaningful Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Empowerment. So what are the preliminary policy recommendations in this task force, Doctor?
Here our task force, basically we believe that is the digital transformation provides the opportunities for both the advanced and the developing economies to leapfrog this industrial age infrastructure, to draw on the vast knowledge spillovers from the internet, and to take advantage of the new market offered by the digital platforms, and to exploit these production possibilities enabled by the digital technologies. From that standpoint of view, and there are 5 policy recommendations that made it. We communicated. We are in the process of communicating to the G20. The first one is the place the digital at the core of the recovery strategy, and investing in the digital generates the greater than the average returns for the economy, particularly for the G20s. Second is the boost the infrastructure investment, and the foundation for the digital economy is strong, and it needs a reliable infrastructure. And the third one is that enabling a digital recovery for all, not just for the few. And the fourth one is pushing the green and the digital agenda together, and because we found a lot of synergies and the complementarities, and as well as the multiplicity of the co-benefits. And the fifth one is that is more important, and which is the double the efforts to improve the ICT skills and the digital literacy. And for the data governance architecture, we recommend to establish a fair digital competition, basically to promote the technology neutrality and then encourage the collaboration between the advanced and the emerging economies. I think these are the 6 major issues of recommendations that is being made to the G20.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambomosi, and thank you as well. It would need another session if we would want to go to the privacy issues. But now I'm happy to leave the stage to Paolo Magri from ISPI, that will have the conversation with Filippo Grandi of the UNCR, head of the UNCR, and Carolina Sanchez Paramo. And see you very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.